we are ensuring that a person only sees their own notes, right? But what if we were incompetent programmers and we hard-coded somebody's user ID? And when we, now you don't need to do this, I'm just demonstrating, but when we said sync notes, instead of doing this, we accidentally said that user ID / notes. That's my Gmail persona. Then if I sign in, even if I sign in as fretless me, I will see Gmail Davies note. We should probably enforce at the database level that only that user can see their own notes. That also ensures that if there are other apps, like a mobile app that talks to the same Firebase endpoints, that they can't mess this up either. Even if they can't get to their own notes, we can at least stop them from seeing notes that they're unauthorized to see. You may remember under the database rules, the default was you had to at least be authenticated. We changed that so that everyone can see and change everything. What we want to do is make it so that each user can only see their own notes. By the way, anybody know the difference between authentication and authorization? So authentication verifies that you are who you say you are. It just verifies your identity, but it has nothing to do with what you're allowed to see. That would be authorization. Authorization determines what you have permission to do. Authentication, you are who you say you are. Authorization, you're allowed to do stuff. So notice permission stuff isn't on authentication. That only has to do with signing in. Under database rules, that's where we determine what you're allowed to do. And let's check out the docs. Real-time database. Security and rules. Understanding rules. Authentication. We've got user identity is an important security concept. Authorization. Identifying your user is only part of security. Once you know who they are, you need a way to control their access to data in your database. Firebase database rules allow you to control access for each user. For example, here's a set of security rules that allows anyone to read the path foo, but no one to write to it. Right? So we've done something like that. But the Firebase database rules include built-in variables and functions that allow you to refer to other paths, server-side timestamps, authentication information, and more. So here's an example of a rule that grants write access for authenticated users to /users /their UID. So rules, users, UID, write. So a path to that endpoint, basically. So we want something that looks like that. It looks like you can use $UID to refer to the UID. Excuse me. Auth.uid will refer to the UID of the logged in user. And this is just a variable we're kind of creating to represent whatever endpoint this is. And there are examples, by the way, on the website with the notes of a variety of rules. So we want to do something kind of like this. So under rules, instead of global rules, we want rules that are specific to our notes. So we could say $user ID to meaning whatever endpoint. I want people to only be able to read that endpoint if their user ID equals whatever endpoint this is. So if you remember the default rules, they said auth not equal null. So in other words, you have to be signed in to see anything. And on top of that, we want to say only if auth.uid equals the endpoint. And I want my write rules to be the same. To make sure this works, publish, because these are unpublished changes. Heck, you can also simulate this, which is kind of neat. Let's see. Location. Let's say morning.firebase.io / and I'll just make up a user ID. I'll say dstruce. And I'll say I'm not authenticated, and I run to see if I can read. I cannot. Oh, wait, I have an error. I forgot a comma. Simulated read denied. What if I am authenticated and my UID is, yeah, sure, this random thing. Run. Simulated read denied. What if my UID is dstruce? Simulated read allowed. What about write? Run. Yep, allowed. So for any endpoint, it's going to make sure that my UID matches the name of that endpoint. What if I say /dstruce /notes? Is that allowed too? Yes. Good. So something like this should protect it. So let's publish these changes. And right now I'm logged in as fretless me trying to look at Gmail me's notes. And now nothing shows up. If I try to add a note, it doesn't show up. I get some permission denied warnings in the console. So if I sign out and sign in as Gmail, then my notes show up. So we can change this back to, instead of hard coding the UID, actually put that user's UID. So now I sign out, I sign in as fretless me, and I get my own notes back. But I made it so that there's no way I can read that data if I'm not that user. Now, because of the way our endpoint is set up, where the user ID is the first key here, everything's nested under that, that means absolutely everything is going to be scoped by user. If I had some other kind of data, like these, when could I see these? I can only see these notes if my UID were notes. And, we don't want notes that aren't scoped by user. That's fine. But what if I wanted to start having some sort of public data in there? Like, I don't know, some help information or any kind of data that everyone should be allowed to see. Maybe I made a key public, and that contained something like title, note header. Now, the only way anyone could read this is if their user ID were public. So if we wanted any kind of public information, the way this rule is set up, we would need to change the way we nested this stuff. So for example, we could say, instead of user ID / notes. We could say notes / user ID. And then change our rules so that this stuff is nested under notes. So only within notes oops. Only within notes do I look for this user ID key. Then anything outside of that, like I could say specifically the public endpoint, everyone can read. Everyone can write. So then I could test this. So let's say /public /notes, and I am not authenticated. Simulated write allowed /notes /dstruce. Simulated write denied. If I'm authenticated as dstruce, write allowed. And this person can still get to public, right? Yep. So let's publish that. So what we changed about our data, and we can get rid of these now. Well, I don't have any notes yet. Let's make some notes. Newly nested, blah, blah, blah. What's happening here? There we go. Create a new one, blah, 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 blah. So we see now that's under notes / my user ID. So I'll get rid of these top level keys that are user ID. So I'm just changing the way I'm nesting them because that gives me the option of still having some stuff outside of a user ID. I typed that straight into Firebase. But if I wanted to get this data using the Firebase API, it wouldn't stop me based on my user ID. So yeah, maybe I'm not using that yet, but now I have the option. So here's how my rules ended up. I'm going to copy this into Slack. And again, the notes include stuff about this, or they will. Some database level authorization. So no matter how we screw up the app, the in-app permissions, they still won't be able to get to any data that they're not allowed to see. And that's frankly more important than them being able to see their own data.